Welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. And we are back doing what you guys all want, more draft profiles as we inch closer and closer to the draft. Today, we're looking at a Swedish-born player who plays for the U.S. national development team in Cutter Gauthier. So we're going to preview him, profile him, see if he'd be a fit with the Sharks, and of course, in our ever-ending quest to find William Eklund a friend. All that more on today's Locked On Sharks.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm your host, JD Young, contributor, of course, to San Jose Hockey Now and Fear the Fin. And we're diving deep back into the profiles as you guys all love and enjoy. Trying again to find that friend for William Eklund. On today's show, we do have an expert on Cutter Gauthier, whose dad was a former Shark, and I believe Sheng Peng had it where he all-time leader in save percentage against for the Sharks. That he stopped 3 of 3 shots, so good for him. But if you guys are new to the podcast or just checking out it for the first time, what I'll do is I'll dig into the stats, kind of a quick overview of the stats for the player, and then we will bring on an expert to kind of break down the player, see if they are worthy of the Sharks pick at number 11, and of course, how they would fit in the Sharks system. So, of course, let's talk about one Cutter Gauthier. He is a January 2004 kid, born in Sweden, but then moved to the USA. His dad played pro hockey, as I said. 6'3", 194 pounds, plays center and left wing, but I believe he's going to be more of a left wing when he gets to the, as he kind of continues his development. Ranked everywhere from, you see him like 12th, elite prospects. Bob McKenzie has him at 13th. McKeon has him as 20. Craig Button has him at number 7. Smaht Scouting has him at number 18. Last year on the U.S. national under 18 team, played 54 games, had 34 goals, 31 assists for 65 points, puts him at a nice 1.20 points per game. So now we bring in a new friend of the show, Paul Zuck, who writes for Smaht Scouting, did the profile on Cutter, and also writes for Buffalo Charging. Paul, welcome to Locked On Sharks. I hope the expectations aren't set too high of how dumb this podcast actually is.
No, it's great, JD. Thank you for having me. It's a blast to come on and talk about one of my favorite players for the national team development program for the U.S. and obviously for the upcoming 2022 NHL draft in Cutter Gauthier.
So Cutter Gauthier, he's kind of, it feels like a little bit of the lost guy when you talk about some of the other guys on the national team. You know, you have Frank Nazar and et cetera. What makes him worthy of a potential, top half of the first round pick for Cutter?
So obviously, like you mentioned, when you're talking about the development team program out of the U.S., you're talking about Logan Cooley, you're talking about Frank Nazar, you're talking about, guys like Seamus Casey on defense and stuff like that. Cutter Gauthier kind of goes, I don't want to say under the radar, but he's definitely not like the first name, at least in many people's eyes, that pops up. But when I think of him, the first word that comes to mind is versatile. He can play in any spot up and down the lineup. He can be your first line winger. He can be your third line center. It doesn't matter where he plays. He's going to be successful. And something like that bodes very well for him, not only at the NCAA level where he's headed next year. He's off to Boston College. But also at the NHL level, obviously, you want to have players in your lineup who can be versatile and can basically play in any situation they're presented with. So I think a lot of teams are going to be having him high on their radar. But yeah, like when it comes to his gameplay, just the versatility is off the charts.
So, I mean, he's a big boy and kind of fits under that power forward type of mode, right? Is he one of those, I don't want to say Timo Meyer, but kind of like a mini Timo Meyer where he's going to take the puck and just kind of drive to the net? Or like, what's his kind of play style for someone who's, I mean, he's 6'3", 194. That's a pretty good size for someone who's only 18 right now.
Exactly. Yeah. His size definitely bodes very well for him at the NHL level. I mean, going in, he doesn't really have to gain, a whole lot of weight, or he doesn't have to go through like a short growth spurt in the next, 6 to 8 months or however long it may take him to kind of reach obviously full physical maturity. He's almost there. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you described he's a power forward, and that is the true definition of his game. That's his bread and butter. I mean, like, he plays at a high pace, but he also doesn't play, almost like as he's in a rush. It's very relaxed. So, I mean, when you look at his game, it looks very mature, and it looks, I don't want to say it's pro ready, but it's pretty close. But yeah, like you said, he's a power forward. When he's in the corner, he can muscle people off the puck using his size, but he's also got the skill and the talent to kind of fend off, defenders from trying to get the puck. So, I mean, he's able to protect the puck down low in the corner, and then he's also very talented with the puck on his stick. So, I mean, he can either shoot the puck from anywhere, like he loves to shoot from the left circle. He can wire a shot in. I love his shot. His accuracy needs a touch of work there, but in the grand scheme of things, I mean, he's dynamite.
So it seems like, I mean, this is kind of a great package where it's, he plays a full 200-foot game. You say he's very versatile. He can play up and down the lineup. Like, what's the issue here, right?
So, I mean, when you're looking at things, I mean, there's not going to be, unless you're Connor McDavid or like Wayne Gretzky or Sidney Crosby, there's not going to be an aspect of your game that couldn't use work, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, when I look at him, there's a few things that I would like to see a little bit of improvement on. He does tend to shoot the puck a lot, which is not a bad thing. But when it comes to accuracy, like the absolute last thing you want to see is if he's rifling a wrist shot on net from the left circle and it misses the net. And he has a very powerful shot. If that puck rings out around the boards and out of the zone, that's just an offensive zone killer.
Yeah. And you obviously set up the transition going the other way, like right there. Yeah.
Exactly. The last thing you want in the offensive zone is an unforced turnover. So, I mean, from that aspect, he could stand to work on his shot accuracy a little bit. And one thing that I noticed about his game that personally I like a risk taker. I mean, obviously high risk, high reward.
Yep.
So the one thing that, he may look to address as he kind of develops at Boston College and obviously as he transitions into the NHL in a season or two or however long it may take him, it might be just to kind of mitigate those risks. I mean, like I said, I'm a risk, like when I like to watch players, I like to, if they're going to take risks, that's great. But obviously I'm not everybody. I don't work in the NHL. I'm not a coach. I'm not a scout. You know what I mean? So he may look to kind of limit those risks just a tad. I mean, obviously you're still going to want to create that offense because when it works, it looks pretty and it works. But when it doesn't, it has potential to kind of get a little ugly. So, and aside from that, the only other thing I could say negative about his game is maybe just his shift-to-shift consistency. I mean, there's a couple times where he almost kind of looks checked out, but not like to a terrible extent. Mm-hmm. Just kind of, making a more consistent game. But
you know what isn't a risk? Checking out rockauto.com. With ever-increasing makes and models, it's impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. So why endure often pointless and seemingly intimidating questions? What type of car do you have? Does your car go broom? Et cetera, et cetera. And then the person behind the computer, they kind of clack at their computer, and then they only have one part because that's all they carry in the warehouse. You don't have to worry about that with rockauto.com. You save time and money when using rockauto.com. They're a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. This podcast is a 100% pro doing-it-yourself. And prices are reliably low for every customer, so they have everything you need from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, even new carpet. So go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solutions to your auto part needs. Head over to rockauto.com right now, see all the parts available for your car or truck, and write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box. That way they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, so you kind of talked about his versatility, and I mean, we've see, especially with players this age, where it's like they might be dynamos in the offensive end, and of course their defensive game needs to, evolve and mature as they play. With Gauthier, that doesn't really seem to be the issue, right? Like he's a 3-zone player right now going to Boston College, right?
Exactly. Yeah. One of the aspects I think a lot of teams, scouts, and GMs will love about his game is, like you said, he can play 200 feet. There's not an area of the ice where his game lacks. I mean, he does get the majority of his time, obviously, in the neutral and offensive zone, which is obviously going to happen with a player of his, skill set and caliber. But I mean, that's not to say he's a slouch in the defensive zone. I mean, one aspect I like of him is he's able to use his size. Like when he's killing penalties, he can use that size, the 6'3", obviously, with his stick. He can defend and block a lot of passing lanes and a lot of shots, obviously just getting himself in the way, which is a huge bonus. There's not going to be a coach anywhere out there that won't appreciate a good penalty killer.
Yeah.
So also with that,
sorry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, when I look at stuff like that, I mean, his physicality too in the defensive zone. He is not afraid to punish, an attacker that's trying to break in or whatnot, or if someone's trying to get cute at the blue line, he's not afraid to lower the shoulder and, absolutely plaster that poor kid. So he's also incredibly talented. Like if the NDTP is, hemmed in their zone, he's able to kind of, take control of the situation and hopefully end that, defensive zone pressure.
Nice. So is it, you think, maybe just a ceiling thing? What is his ceiling, you think, as an NHL prospect? I mean, if you're going in the kind of the middle of the first round, like we talked about, like Cooley and Nazar are been ranked higher than him. Is it just because you're getting maybe a high ceiling, low floor type of player with him? Or low floor, anyway, yes, the other way around.
I knew what you meant.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's so hard to say. I mean, I'd really like to say that, he's going to turn out to be, like a 70, 80-point player in the NHL, but it's so far ahead. It's hard to offer a realistic projection. That being said, I mean, I would love to have him somewhere in my middle six. I do think, like, obviously he's capable of playing at center and the wing. I think his game and skill set's better suited on the wing in the NHL once he gets there. So, yeah, somewhere along, maybe second or third line, I'd love to see him there. As far as the ceiling goes, I mean, he definitely has the potential and the skill set to kind of become that first-line winger. It kind of just depends on how, what system he gets into and, how a coach would like to utilize him.
So he's off to Boston College, as you said. How long do you think he'll be there before he's ready to kind of make the jump to the AHL or /NHL?
I can see him probably spending at least a year. I don't want to say 2 for sure, because obviously we've been shocked before by, players coming out of college, going right to the AHL, and everyone develops at a different rate. So I'm going to say at least a year, but don't be shocked if it's 2.
That makes sense. I mean, we saw, like Thomas Bordelot, I know he was a second-round pick, but, spending 2 years there. Yeah, I mean, I think 2 years kind of feels right for a lot of kind of like first and second round, unless you're, like top at the end of the draft. Yeah, I feel like 2 years kind of feels right. So the big question, right? The Sharks, of course, last year selected William Eklund. Everybody we talked to loves William Eklund. How could you not? It's actually a prerequisite to come on the podcast. You have to like William Eklund. How would these two guys play together, you think? Because it feels like there might be a nice kind of almost, you have Eklund doing Eklund things and then Gauthier just like powering to the net type of situation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think they'd mesh really well together. It's all just going to depend on how both, I guess, are utilized at that next level. So it depends on, who's going to play the wing, who's going to play center. Obviously, they're both incredible talents, and I think their games would play off each other very well. But yeah, I could definitely see if the Sharks end up, going up. They pick 11.
Yep.
I can see them going up, and I mean, you see a lot of rankings where Cutter's like, we have him at 18. I would have no problem taking him probably in the top. I want to say his window's like somewhere between 8 to 18.
Mm-hmm.
It really just depends on how, obviously teams fall in love with him or not. But yeah, if he's there at 11 and the Sharks are able to grab him, I mean, it's going to be a stellar pick. And I think he becomes instantly probably the second best forward in their prospect pool.
Wow.
And that's
that
no
behind
knock on
Eklund.
Bordelot, and that's no knock on Ozzy, but I think he's a talent. It's hard to deny.
Oh, that you just kind of asked my next question. So yeah, I mean, looking at the Sharks prospect pool, they have spent a lot of assets on trying to improve their forwards. The 2020 draft where they spent every pick on forward, and then last year, of course, picking Eklund in the first round. So you think he would instantly be better than? I mean, I guess Ozzy was a late round pick and Bordelot, who has already made the NHL, but you think he's a better prospect than those guys right now, or when they were
At
coming
the
out? I guess
Yeah,
maybe.
when they were coming out, I would say, yeah, I believe Cutter is a better prospect. And like I said, that's no knock on them. They're both incredibly talented players, and I think both are going to have decent NHL careers. I don't want to say too much and hype them up, and then
Oh, we've
everyone's.
already hyped up the Bordelot hype train. It is already off the station here on this
I
show.
don't
So.
want angry Sharks fans coming in my DMs, but I mean, we'll see what happens. That being said, though, I mean, I can see Cutter fitting in that prospect pool very well. I mean, it's when you look at those guys, I mean, they all kind of have like a similar height and weight, whereas Cutter obviously has 4 or 5 inches on him and probably 15 to 20 pounds by the time he hits the NHL. So I mean, having
Yeah.
that big body presence, I think would definitely be a huge asset to the Sharks prospect pool.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, they do have Brandon Coe, who was a 4th round pick, and he's been playing really well, and is set to make his Barracuda debut. But yeah, the Sharks have really kind of honed in on a style of forward recently, and I think sometimes you do have to have a little versatility in that. So one thing I did want to ask about Gauthier, where it's the Sharks have been looking, with these different forwards where they looking for those high IQ kind of play driving, how like think the game. How well does Cutter think the game? You think Cutter think the game?
I know there's a lot of things.
That's a lot of things.
I think his hockey IQ is very high. I mean, obviously there's some times, like I mentioned before, where he has those high risk plays that might not turn out. But I mean, you're not even thinking about those high risk plays if you're not thinking the game at a high level.
Yep.
So one aspect of his game that I absolutely love is his passing. There are many nights where he has at least like 3 to 4 passes where it's like, wow, how did he see that guy? Or how did he thread the needle with a seam pass through 3 defenders somewhere in the offensive zone? So I mean, when it comes to the high IQ aspect, yeah, I think he's got incredible hockey IQ. I mean, there's a lot of times where he kind of gets overshadowed because of the likes of Cooley and Nazar. But I think when it comes down to the actual aspect of his games in the offensive zone, and that's not a knock on his, neutral zone play or defensive zone play as well, but I think he'd fit definitely into that high IQ, kind of mindset the Sharks are trying to build.
All right. Before we continue, let's take a quick break. Talk to you guys about our friends over at BetOnline. Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the #1 source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find out the latest odds, news, and sports development, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next year's NFL futures. Again, hammer the Dolphins over on wins. They're going to win a lot of games. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wager information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. I don't want to hear about your Bills talk over there.
I can honestly say I'm not a Bills fan.
Okay. Sorry. I know you're right for Buffalo. I just didn't want to assume, but I was going to assume a little bit. So Nazar, who do you personally like between Gauthier and Nazar? I know Nazar's been ranked a little bit higher and stuff, and I want to include Cooley, who's probably going to be a top 3 pick. So between, Gauthier, if you're a GM at like say number 8 or 9, who do you like between those two guys?
For me, it's Nazar. I am a huge Frankie Nazar fan. I mean, I love the way he plays the game as well. And he's more of like, I don't want to say Cooley isn't a playmaker because he is, but I think Nazar has that little touch of more like higher hockey IQ, where I think his playmaking is just next level. And I mean, if I'm sitting there at like 8, I have zero issue. I'm running to the draft table and throwing my card in for Frank Nazar. I mean, that would be a steal. I'm hoping, he can kind of land in Buffalo, not trying to be biased or anything.
That's I know that feels a very Detroit pick too. Actually, they'll pick somebody from Sweden. So, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think between the two of them, Frankie Nazar is my pick, but it's closer than I'd like to admit.
Oh, that's fine. So you kind of talked about, you think a range for him is 8 through 18.
Mm-hmm.
Where does he end up going?
I
So
really
I'll
want
read
to
if
say,
you want, I can read the all right, so we've got number 1 Montreal, number 2 is New Jersey, 3 is Arizona, 4 Seattle, 5 is Philly, 6 is Columbus, 7 is Ottawa, 8 Detroit, 9 is Buffalo, 10 is Anaheim. The Sharks are 11. Columbus is at 12. Islanders are at the 13. Winnipeg at 14. Vancouver at 15. Buffalo at 16. Nashville 17, and Dallas at 18.
that's an interesting board. I can see probably 3 teams in that window who I think where his game would really be strong. San Jose is one. Columbus would be my other one. I think they're kind of lacking the presence that Josh Anderson brought to the lineup since he's been dealt. And I think Gauthier could kind of slide in and be that sort
Is
of
he
Josh
is he Josh Anderson handsome?
That I don't know. I wouldn't be able to comment on that. But I think in that kind of like maybe 12 to 15 range, Winnipeg wouldn't be a bad option either, because it's still kind of yet to be seen what they're going to end up doing with Pierre-Luc Dubois. But yeah, I would say probably in that 12 to 15 range is where you're going to see him go.
Gotcha. All right. Last question. So 5 years from now, I'm still doing this podcast. I have you back on, and I ask you, who's the best player that comes out of the draft? Who's the best player?
I love Shane Wright. Don't get me wrong. He's a hell of a hockey player.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I feel this way, but it's going to be Logan Cooley. I mean, just you look at every aspect of his game, and it's off the charts. I mean, there's not a thing that he doesn't do very well. And he's kind of risen up the ranks, I guess, this year really fast. I mean, like if you look back a year ago at this time, he was a first rounder, but I don't think anyone was talking about him in the top 3.
No. Yeah.
He kind of
it was like Brian Lambert, and Shane Wright, and I guess
Ivan Miroshnichenko.
Miroshnichenko.
But no, I when it comes down to everything, and like you said, 5 years down the road, we're talking about this again. I can honestly say that I think Logan Cooley is going to be the best player that comes out of this draft.
Who is your biggest kind of big out of like the top kind of 10 guys or 10 or 15? Who's your guy you're kind of lower on than maybe some of the consensus rankings?
I would probably say, and I don't know if this is a consensus just among us at Smaht Scouting or if it's just, personally, but I was high on Simon Nemec earlier in the year, and then probably around Christmas, things started to kind of where it's not that he did anything wrong. It's just all the players in that kind of window improved. Like, I mean, you look at Juraj Slafkovsky, who had just incredible World Juniors and then Olympics and then World Championship. It just seems he's been shooting up boards left and right. Mm-hmm. And then you look at guys like David Jiricek. I know he got hurt, but since he's been back, I thought he's played fairly well. And I look at a couple other players just in that range, and he's like Nemec is kind of just, I don't want to say he's tapered off, but I mean, he hasn't really done anything to kind of keep up the pace. So I would say he's kind of lower on my board than most.
Awesome. Paul, you said it all. Where can the people find you, and what do you got coming out next?
You can find me on Twitter at paulzook_81. And currently I'm going to be working on a Jimmy Snuggerud report, another young talent from the United States National Team Development Program.
Awesome. And of course, you can find the show on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Locked On Sharks. You can listen wherever you get podcasts, of course, Apple, Spotify, Odyssey, wherever. I mean, it's a podcast. They're everywhere now. You can watch on YouTube. We, of course, are getting closer to our 1,000 goal. I think we're trying to hit 1,000 by the draft, so make sure you guys subscribe. And you can find me on Twitter at myfryhole. Thank you guys for making us your first Sharks listen. Go check out the Locked On NHL channel if you want to find out the insane McKinnon-McDavid game that's going on right now as I record this. And we'll be back tomorrow with some more stuff that I'm thinking of doing right now. Probably goalie stuff. So bye, friends.